not guilty in the murder of his ex-girlfriend. Her body was found last month at an Elmsford motel. News 12's Lauren Del Val was at Westchester County Court for the hearing.
Family and friends of 32-year-old Roseberline Philippe packed the courtroom. Bartley appeared before County Court Judge Maurice Williams. Bartley is accused of murdering Philippe, his ex-girlfriend, in the presence of their 2-year-old son at the Elmsford Days Inn.
On November 2nd, 2025, Roseberline Philippe walked into a Days Motel in Elmsford, New York, accompanied by the father of her child, Justin Bartley, and their 2-year-old son. Only one adult would leave that room alive. Hours later, hotel staff would make a discovery that triggered a homicide investigation, an urgent child search, and a series of questions that remain difficult to answer. Why did Roseberline agree to meet Justin Bartley behind a closed door after trying to end their relationship? What happened inside room 230 that no one interrupted? How did a man already under court supervision remain free to escalate to lethal violence? And why was their child still with him when he left the scene? As prosecutors reconstruct the timeline, each answer reveals deeper failures, missed warnings, and irreversible consequences. What was preventable and what was ignored before Roseberline Philippe's final hours?
He was indicted on second-degree murder and endangering the welfare of a child. During a brief court appearance, the attorney for 32-year-old Bartley pled not guilty on his behalf. Philippe's family was also issued temporary orders of protection. Rose's father Benoit and brother Benel spoke with me afterwards off camera. They both say Bartley had shown aggressive tendencies previously and just want justice for the, quote, senseless killing. Rose was the third eldest daughter in her family, and her father referred to her as a sweet princess who never had problems with anyone. Philippe's family is taking care of the 2-year-old child. In White Plains, Westchester County, Lauren Del Val, News 12.
Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Roseberline Philippe was a 32-year-old woman living in Westchester County, New York. At the time of her death, she was employed as an office assistant at White Plains Hospital, where she worked in a clerical support role. Her position involved managing administrative tasks, coordinating paperwork, assisting medical staff with scheduling and maintaining patient records. Colleagues describe her as reliable and consistent in her attendance and performance. Her workdays typically followed a fixed routine, beginning early in the morning and ending in the afternoon, allowing her to balance employment with childcare responsibilities. Philippe attended Port Chester High School, where she completed her secondary education. It was during her teenage years at the school that she became acquainted with Justin Bartley, who would later become her romantic partner. After graduating, Philippe remained in the local area, maintaining close ties to her family and community. She did not relocate far from her childhood environment, and much of her adult life was centered around stability, work, and family. Her immediate family provided regular support, particularly after she became a mother. Family members were actively involved in her life and were familiar with her daily routines. Those close to Philippe described her as reserved, focused on her responsibilities, and attentive to her child. She was not known to engage in public disputes or erratic behavior, and generally maintained a private personal life. Philippe was a mother of a 2-year-old son, who was central to her daily life. Following the birth of her child, her priorities shifted significantly. She structured her schedule around childcare, employment, and ensuring a stable living environment. Family members noted that she became increasingly focused on long-term planning, including consistent employment and secure housing. These changes coincided with a growing effort to establish independence and reduce reliance on others. After becoming a mother, Philippe began distancing herself from situations she viewed as unpredictable or unsafe. According to those familiar with her circumstances, She took deliberate steps to regain control over her personal life. This included reassessing her relationship with her child's father and setting clearer boundaries. These decisions were not sudden, but developed over time as she adjusted to the responsibilities of parenthood. Roseberline Philippe and Justin Bartley first met while attending Port Chester High School. Their initial connection developed during their teenage years, when they were part of the same school environment. At that time, the relationship was informal and did not immediately progress into a long-term partnership. After high school, they reconnected as adults, and the relationship became romantic. The relationship extended over several years, marked by periods of separation and reconciliation. During this time, the couple shared housing arrangements intermittently. A significant milestone occurred with the birth of their son, which permanently linked them as co-parents. Following the child's birth, the relationship dynamic shifted. Responsibilities increased, and disagreements reportedly became more frequent. Individuals familiar with the situation indicated that tensions escalated after the child was born. Philippe reportedly expressed concerns about Bartley's behavior and decision-making. These concerns became more pronounced as she attempted to establish a stable environment for her son. Over time, she began limiting contact and reducing shared interactions to matters related strictly to childcare. Philippe made multiple attempts to end the relationship. These efforts included limiting communication, declining in-person meetings, and relying on family support. Her family became increasingly aware of the situation, particularly as conflict became more visible. Relatives noted that Philippe appeared cautious and deliberate in her actions, indicating an effort to disengage while minimizing disruption to her child's routine. Justin Bartley was 32 years old at the time of the incident. Like Philippe, he attended Port Chester High School, where the two first became acquainted. Bartley remained in the Westchester County area as an adult. His background included prior involvement with the criminal justice system. At the time of the incident, Bartley was on probation stemming from earlier legal issues. His criminal history included offenses that resulted in court supervision rather than incarceration. These conditions require compliance with legal restrictions, though records indicate ongoing challenges with stability and compliance. Individuals familiar with Bartley described a pattern of volatile behavior and difficulty managing conflict. He was known to have confrontations with people close to Philippe, including members of her family. In the months leading up to November 2025, Bartley's interactions with Philippe reportedly became more frequent and increasingly contentious. Despite attempts to end the relationship, Bartley continued to seek contact. His presence in Philippe's life persisted through unplanned visits and repeated communication attempts. This behavior raised concerns among family members, particularly as Philippe appeared to be actively distancing herself. In the days preceding November 2, 2025, interactions between Philippe and Bartley intensified. Family members reported that Bartley appeared uninvited at locations connected to Philippe, including family residences. These encounters were described as confrontational and unwanted. One such incident involved a confrontation with Philippe's family shortly before the motel meeting. This encounter increased concern among relatives, who believed tensions were escalating rather than resolving. Despite these concerns, Philippe later agreed to meet Bartley. The reasons for the motel meeting remain unclear. Investigators have examined whether the meeting was voluntary or influenced by pressure, persistence, or fear. The decision to meet at a motel, rather than a public or family setting, raised questions during the investigation. There is no indication the hotel staff were aware of any ongoing dispute prior to the incident. On the morning of November 2, 2025, Roseberline Philippe arrived at a Days Motel in Elmsford, New York, accompanied by Justin Bartley and their 2-year-old son. The trio checked into a room during the morning hours. Records indicate they were assigned a single room, later identified as a location of the homicide. The child remained present throughout the time spent inside the room. Investigators believe that events inside the room unfolded over several hours. No calls for assistance were recorded from the room during that time, and no hotel staff intervened prior to the discovery. Based on forensic evidence, Philippe suffered a fatal assault involving blunt force trauma. The duration of the encounter suggests prolonged violence rather than a brief altercation. At some point after the assault, Bartley left the motel with the child. Later that afternoon, hotel staff entered the room as part of routine operations. Upon entering, they discovered Roseberline Philippe unresponsive. Emergency services were immediately contacted. First responders arrived and confirmed that Philippe was deceased. The scene was secured and law enforcement initiated a homicide investigation. The motel room was treated as a crime scene, and forensic analysis began shortly thereafter. Authorities reviewed surveillance footage, interviewed witnesses, and coordinated efforts to locate Bartley and the child. The investigation continued as officers worked to reconstruct the timeline and gather evidence related to the events inside the room. When law enforcement secured the day's motel room in Elmsford on the afternoon of November 2nd, 2025, investigators immediately noted a critical absence. Although Roseberline Philippe had arrived at the motel earlier that morning with her former boyfriend, Justin Bartley, and their 2-year-old son, only Philippe was found inside the room. The child was not present at the scene when her body was discovered. Hotel surveillance footage and witness accounts quickly confirmed that the child had been with Bartley when he left the property hours earlier. This discovery elevated the situation from a homicide investigation to a potential child endangerment case, triggering an urgent, coordinated response among multiple law enforcement agencies. Authorities issued alerts to neighboring jurisdictions and began tracking Bartley's movements using motel surveillance footage, traffic cameras, and license plate recognition systems. Video evidence showed Bartley exiting the motel carrying the child and entering a vehicle shortly after the estimated time of the victim's death. From there, investigators reconstructed his route through Westchester County and into New York City. Law enforcement agencies in Westchester County coordinated with New York City Police Department units, focusing on known addresses, prior associations, and locations connected to Bartley. By early evening, investigators narrowed their search to the Bronx. Officers located Bartley and the child without resistance. The child was recovered unharmed and showed no signs of physical injury. Following standard protocol, the child was transported to a medical facility for evaluation and later released into the care of Child Protective Services. Custody arrangements were coordinated with family members, ensuring the child's immediate safety, while longer-term guardianship decisions were addressed through legal channels. Justin Bartley was taken into custody shortly after the child's recovery. He was transported to Westchester County for processing and formally charged. Prosecutors filed charges of second-degree murder in connection with Roseberline Philippe's death, as well as endangering the welfare of a child due to the child's presence during the incident and subsequent removal from the scene. Bartley was arraigned in Westchester County Court within 24 hours of his arrest. During the arraignment, prosecutors outlined the basic facts of the case, including the timeline of events, the severity of the victim's injuries, and the presence of the child during the incident. The court was informed of Bartley's prior criminal history and his probationary status at the time of the offense. Bartley entered a plea of not guilty to all charges. Given the seriousness of the allegations, the prosecution requested that he be held without bail. The judge agreed, citing the violent nature of the charges, the risk of flight, and concerns regarding public safety. Bartley was remanded to the Westchester County Jail pending further court proceedings. In initial statements, prosecutors emphasized that the case involved both a fatal act of violence and the exposure of a young child to a dangerous situation. They confirmed that the investigation was ongoing and that additional evidence would be presented as the case moved forward. Investigators conducted a detailed forensic examination of the motel room where Roseberline Philippe was found. Evidence collected included physical signs of prolonged struggle, bloodstain patterns, and items believed to have been used during the assault. The room was processed over several hours, with forensic teams documenting the scene and collecting materials for laboratory analysis. Surveillance footage from the motel played a central role in reconstructing the timeline. Cameras captured the couple checking in together, Bartley leaving the room intermittently, and his final departure with the child. Additional footage from surrounding areas helped confirm the sequence of events and narrowed the window during which the fatal assault occurred. An autopsy was performed by the medical examiner, who determined that Philippe died from blunt force trauma. The report indicated multiple injuries consistent with repeated physical assault. The manner of death was ruled a homicide, confirming investigators' initial assessment. Phone records were examined to establish communication between the victim and suspect before and during the incident. These records help corroborate the timeline and identify gaps in contact that align with surveillance footage. Witness interviews, including statements from hotel staff and individuals familiar with the couple's relationship, provided further context. Investigators also reviewed Bartley's probation status, examining whether any violations had occurred prior to the incident and whether prior warning signs had been reported. This review raised broader questions about monitoring practices, response to prior incidents, and whether intervention could have occurred earlier. As the case progressed, pre-trial hearings were scheduled to address procedural matters, evidence admissibility, and motions from both the defense and prosecution. Prosecutors began assembling a case built on forensic evidence, surveillance footage, and documented timelines. The defense signaled its intent to challenge elements of the prosecution's narrative, including the interpretation of evidence and the circumstances leading up to the incident. If convicted, Bartley faces significant prison time under New York law. Second-degree murder carries a potential sentence of 25 years to life, while the child endangerment charge carries additional penalties. Sentencing will be determined by the court following a verdict or plea agreement. The trial timeline remains subject to court scheduling, evidentiary rulings, and potential motions. Prosecutors have stated that they intend to pursue the case fully and continue providing updates as new information becomes available. In the days following Roseberline Philippe's death, her family released statements acknowledging the loss and focusing on arrangements for her son's care. Relatives described Philippe as a working mother focused on providing stability for her child. Community members in White Plains and Port Chester organized vigils and memorial gatherings. Co-workers at White Plains Hospital acknowledged her role within the organization and the sudden impact of her absence. Hospital administrators confirmed that support resources were made available to staff. The financial consequences of the case were immediate. Funeral expenses, legal matters, and the long-term care of the child placed additional strain on the family. Fundraising efforts were organized to assist with burial costs and future support for the child. As legal proceedings continue, the case remains under close public scrutiny. It has raised questions about domestic violence intervention, probation oversight, and child protection procedures. The outcome of the trial is expected to have lasting implications for all parties involved. The killing of Roseberline Philippe fits into a broader and well-documented pattern of intimate partner violence that continues to surface across the United States. In many cases, the most dangerous period in an abusive relationship occurs not during its early stages, but when one partner attempts to leave. Law enforcement records, court filings, and advocacy research consistently show that separation often escalates threats, surveillance, and violence rather than bringing immediate safety. Intimate partner violence frequently develops gradually. Early warning signs may include controlling behavior, intimidation, repeated unwanted contact, or emotional pressure framed as reconciliation. Over time, these behaviors can intensify, particularly when the abusive partner perceives a loss of control. In cases involving shared children, separation can become even more complicated as custody, visitation, and communication create ongoing points of contact. The risks associated with leaving abusive relationships are often underestimated. Victims may attempt to disengage quietly, limit confrontations, or negotiate closure through meetings intended to de-escalate conflict. These efforts, while logical from the victim's perspective, can expose them to heightened danger, especially when boundaries are not respected. Meetings arranged in private locations, such as motel rooms or residences, can remove safeguards that public spaces or third-party involvement might otherwise provide. In this case, the suspect was on probation at the time of the incident, raising additional questions about the role of probation monitoring in preventing violent outcomes. Probation is intended to serve as both a corrective and supervisory measure, particularly when individuals have prior criminal convictions. However, probation systems are often limited by high caseloads, reliance on self-reporting, and delayed responses to non-compliance unless new charges are filed. While probation conditions may restrict certain behaviors, they do not always include active monitoring of interpersonal relationships or escalating domestic conflicts unless a violation is formally reported. The presence of a child further complicates cases of domestic violence. Exposure to violent incidents, even without physical injury, is widely recognized as harmful to child development. Children may witness assaults directly, hear violence occurring, or experience sudden separation from caregivers due to arrest or death. In this case, the child's presence during the incident and subsequent removal from the scene underscores the secondary harm inflicted beyond the immediate victim. Legal systems typically address child welfare after an incident occurs, rather than as a preventive measure, leaving gaps in early intervention. This case also highlights systemic gaps that frequently emerge in domestic violence-related homicides. These include limited coordination between criminal justice agencies, insufficient protective measures during relationship separations, and reliance on victims to initiate safety planning without consistent institutional support. While resources exist, access to them often depends on timing, awareness, and the victim's ability to navigate complex systems under stress. Despite the arrest and formal charges, several critical questions remain unresolved. One of the most significant is why the meeting between the victim and suspect was arranged at a motel. Investigators have not publicly clarified whether the location was chosen by mutual agreement, proposed by one party, or selected as a perceived neutral space. Motels, while offering privacy, also limit oversight and reduce opportunities for outside intervention. Another unresolved issue is whether intervention was possible before the incident occurred. Reports indicate escalating tension in the days leading up to the meeting, including confrontations involving family members. Whether law enforcement was notified of these interactions, or whether any reports were made that did not meet the threshold for immediate action, remains unclear. In many cases, warning signs are recognized only in hindsight after violence has already occurred. The question of how warning signs were missed extends beyond individual decisions and into institutional responses. Probation supervision, family awareness, and prior encounters with the justice system all represent potential points where risk could have been assessed. However, without explicit threats, documented violations, or direct complaints, systems often lack the authority to intervene proactively. There is also the issue of what protections were unavailable or ineffective. Orders of protection, supervised exchanges, or mediated communication are tools commonly used to reduce risk during separations, but they require formal requests and legal processes. If such measures were not in place, the reasons for their absence, whether due to lack of access, awareness, or timing, remain part of the broader analysis. These unanswered questions are not unique to this case, but rather reflect recurring challenges in preventing intimate partner violence. As of the most recent developments, the suspect remains in custody facing charges that include second-degree murder and endangering the welfare of a child. The legal process is ongoing, with pretrial proceedings expected to address evidence, witness testimony, and the sequence of events leading to the victim's death. Final legal outcomes, including potential sentencing, remain pending and will depend on the findings presented in court. The lasting consequences of this case extend beyond the courtroom. The victim's child now faces life without a mother, along with the long-term effects of exposure to violence and abrupt family disruption. Guardianship arrangements, financial support, and psychological care will shape the child's future, underscoring how a single act of violence can alter multiple lives permanently. This case fits into a broader pattern of domestic violence-related homicides in which prior relationships, separation attempts, and system limitations converge. It reflects ongoing challenges in identifying high-risk situations, enforcing protective measures, and intervening before violence escalates to fatal outcomes. While individual accountability is central to the criminal proceedings, the case also raises broader questions about prevention, monitoring, and the capacity of existing systems to respond effectively to warning signs. As legal proceedings continue, the facts of the case will be examined in detail. Beyond the verdict, the circumstances surrounding the death of Roseberline Philippe remain a documented example of how intimate partner violence can progress unchecked, leaving behind unanswered questions and long-term consequences that extend far beyond a single incident. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.